This is the third video of the walkthrough for project number 2, the ColorPicker. In video number 1 and 2, we talked about the choice of the components. We built the user interface component and we made a connection between those components and our controller, which is controls that screen or that view in the header file. What remains for us is the implementation, and in the implementation we're implementing the action module. We created one action module for this that responds to the user change of this slider. If you hover your mouse over this red circle, this circle next to the action module, it will highlight the component that this action module is connected to. And as you can see, this action module is connected only to the red slider, which means if the red slider moves, this action module will be notified. But how about the green and the blue? In video 2, we argued that since the response of the app to any of these sliders is the same, they all should connect to this one action module. So to make that connection, you can click and drag as we did for the red slider, or you can take from here, from the plus, and go to the module, the component that you want to connect to until it is highlighted, as you can see, and then release. So now if we hover over, you see two components are being selected. If you click again and move to the third one and release, you move now and all three of them are selected, which means that if any of these three slider changes, this action module, the change color, and we call this, by the way, a method, which is an action module, a module that contains a set of instructions that will be executed or will receive the control of the processor or the attention of the processor when any of these events take place. So let's move into implementation. If you go to the view, to switch from this to the view controller, and you can come up here and click to switch between the header file and the implementation file. You can also, since we no longer needing the storyboard, we're done with it, you can take away the storyboard by clicking on the single editor or the standard editor, and that switched us to the storyboard. So I can bring in the navigation and click on the implementation file, and if I no longer need the implementation, I can take it away. If I want to bring the header file to be right next to that, I can click the storyboard and you can see the header file. Actually, this, it says both of them showing the same, but you can switch from the top by switching from the header file to the implementation file or the storyboard file. So you can see them next to one another. I want the implementation, and I already done with the header, and I'm already done with the storyboard, so I switch like that. When you go to the implementation, you will notice few things. Number one, it imports the header file. So the header file, this import statement brings the instructions in the header file and add it here so that the header file is known. There is the ability to extend the definition of in the header file in this module here. Since we are not doing any of that, you can take this out. Then you have the implementation module, which starts with the implementation and ends with the end. Inside the implementation module, you have several other modules. There are three, as you can see. One of them is the one we added, and this one is connected to an event. You see the event connection sign next to it. And two are what we call a life cycle. Life cycle meaning that these two modules are notified by the operating system when certain life cycle events of the screen or the view takes place. The name is usually expressive, so the one selected here is the view did load, which means that this module is notified every time the screen or the view that you are using is loaded, or that this controller controls is loaded. So if you want anything to happen at the time of loading the view, you write the instructions within that module. Within the module meaning is inside those parentheses. There's another one, did receive memory warning, and that's obvious what it does. And then the third one, which is notified once the user moves the one of the screen. This is an action or behavior module that happens or user based action event or module. The first thing that we do as we switch to the implementation is to connect our implementation file with our with the properties that we defined in the header file. So I quickly switch it to the header file so I show you what we're talking about. And on the right side is my header file that we created in video 3, and on the left side is the implementation file. And you see I defined 4 properties in here. For us to use those 4 properties with that name with ease, without any warning or problems, I need to synthesize those properties. And I do this by clicking the @ which brings in the synthesize directive here. And it has a property which could be a comma separated list of all the properties that you want to use. So the red, comma, the blue, comma, the green, comma, the view. And then a semicolon, because all instructions end with a semicolon. If you do not do this, the compiler will ask you to use an automatic name that was the same name as the property. It will show you what you need to do. You can play with that if you want. I don't want to confuse you with this at this point. This is a very explicit. It is true, it is explicit, but this is an easy way to remember. Every time you add a property in the header file, you need to synthesize that in the implementation. What this allows us to do, it allows us to use those properties directly within our program. So now that we moved those 4 in here and we have our action module, let's write the instructions. This sequence of instruction is also known as algorithm, flowchart, problem solving steps, whatever you want to call it. Inside the module, the processor will execute the instructions in order, top to bottom, one by one. So unless you add these 2 slashes, which means this is a comment. So what is the first step? The first step that I want to do is to retrieve the value from each one of those sliders. And if I want to retrieve those values, I want to retrieve them so that I can construct a color out of them. So how do I construct a color? There is a library component, and most of the things that you will think about, at least within the boundaries of this class, there is a library component to do it. So you want to search for it. So how you ask yourself, how do you know the name of the library component? In the beginning, you will find it from me, you will read it in a book, you will find it in a tutorial, you will find it on the website. The quest you have in this class, in addition to learning the intricacies of building an app, is building your own vocabulary of library components and library modules that you can use and what they can do. So there are 3 steps. The first step is to retrieve the values of each of the sliders. The second step is to use the values to construct a digital color. In our world here, use the library module UI color. And then the third step is to change the background color of the display view to the color we just constructed. So 3 steps. There is a trick part when retrieving the values of each of the sliders. Between retrieving the value and putting it in the digital color, where are we going to store it? So like asking somebody, or you want to fetch some water to someone. So the water is in the tap and the person sitting a few feet away. How would you take the water from the tap to that person? You have to put it somewhere. So you bring in a glass, you take the water from the tap in the glass, then you take the glass from the person, and then the person retrieves the water from the glass. So what represents the role of a glass? In our digital world, we call this the variables. In the physical world, these are blocks in the memory of the device that you are using. So in this case, we're going to use variables to store the values from each slider. Variables have types, and depending on this value, we need to allocate some memory for each one of those variables. We use keywords for types to represent those variables. For decimal numbers, the type is called the float. What that type means, and you notice the color here tells you it's a keyword. What the type means is that it tells the operating system how much memory it should reserve for this particular variable. So I will call this the red value. And where do I get the red value from? I get it from the red slider. How do I get it from the red slider? In anything you want from a component or a library module, you send it a message. The format of a message, square brackets, semicolon to end the instruction, and inside the square bracket is the name of the object. So in our object here is red, the name of the object, then the message. So if we click on value, I knew that there is a message called value, but there are several other messages, and this editor show you what they are. These are the actions or behaviors that the UI slider, which is slider red, is a reference to. This is all defined in the UI slider library module. Notice next to value, which is the name of the message, or before that, comes the word float. What this is saying is the message value returns or give you back data of type float, which means you can assign it using an assign operator to any other variable or any other memory location that has the same type, which is float. So this is a type float, this is a type float. So this is the one that we want. Again, you may say, I cannot do this myself. Yes, true. I'm showing it to you now, but as we go through 5 different projects, you will build your own vocabulary with components, modules, and messages. We'll do the same for the blue value, so I will call it blue value. I'll send the message to the slider blue and say, give me your value, slider blue, and assign that to a variable in memory called the blue value. Same for green. And I will take slider green and say, give me your value. So what I did here, I took the value from each slider, assigned them to memory locations with these names. So what's the next step? Is to use this to construct a digital color. So digital color is called UI color. So I want to create a UI color object. So I use a star, and then I will call this new color. New color is the name I'm using for the memory location. This is the same thing that I did here. I'm going to construct a digital color to use it to change the background, but between constructing it and using it, where are we putting it? So this is creating a memory location that has the type reference to a UI color. So this type is called star, and maybe I should put the star here. You can put the star either after the UI color or before the name, but what this is saying is new color is not a variable like this red, blue, green values, but it is a reference to the UI color object. The difference between these two is nothing to concern yourself with. There are some types, like especially the ones used for the numbers, that will be direct variables, and there are others which is almost everything else, because everything will be constructing a library module or a module that we created will be a reference to that module. And then we need to send a message to construct the UI color, so the square bracket, the semicolon. Who am I sending the message to? I am telling you now, but if you needed the information, you can look up the UI color object documentation. But you can send the message to the UI color itself, and then there is a message which says that color with, and there are different ways to construct a color. Why do I say it's construct a color? Notice everything that starts with a color here. This is a message that basically saying create a color using these different ways, and there are different ways. How do I know that what I create is a color? Look right before it. It says UI color star, which is exactly what we put here. So this saying that this message, for instance, creating a color with red, green, blue, and alpha will create a color and will return a reference to that color. We are assigning that reference to the new color. Do not attempt to type the full name of the message here. As you can see, Xcode completes it for you. All what you need to do is hit enter. It asks you for a value. So what this is saying that there are 4 values you have to submit. Color with, meaning that the message name is color with, and the message is receiving 4 variables or 4 parameters. 1 for the value of the red, 1 for the value of green, 1 for the value of blue, and 1 for the value of alpha. So here I will use red value for the value of red and hit the tab to jump to the second one, which will be my green value. Then hit the tab to jump to the third one, which is my blue value. Then hit the tab to jump to the alpha. And if you notice, I did not yet construct the alpha slider, so I'm just gonna put 1.0. Once we create the alpha slider, we're gonna add one line here to retrieve the value of the alpha slider and use it instead of the 1. Now that I constructed the color, I need to change the background color of the display view. And this is I'm just gonna change this to view. And what I am going to do in here is to send a message, and I'm sending a message to my display view, and that message I want to change the background color. So there is a message that says change the background color, and this message requires data. So I add the column to say that I'm going to give you the data. I'm sorry, the message is not background color. This message retrieves the background color. It's called set background color. Every time you want to change the value, you use set. The one without the set give you that background color. And here you say, it says in order for this message to work, it needs to receive one parameter. That parameter need to be of this type, which is a reference to UI color, which exactly what my new color is. So these are the instructions that will retrieve the values from the sliders, construct a new color, and change the background to that new color. So let's test our app. So change the red value, and as you can see, the view is reflecting the changes in the red value. Change the green, the same thing, because I connected all three sliders. Change the blue, the same thing. If I make them all at the maximum value, you get the white color. You make them all at the 0 value, you get the black color. Making 2 0 and 1 full, you get the full of that color. So now our all three sliders are working. They change the color is displayed. This is the core features. There are some modifications, adding the alpha slider, and also I would like to add something in here, and adding the value, what the value is. Like here I can see it, but I don't know what the number is, so I want to add a small label here to display the numbers of those sliders, and we'll do that in the next video.